Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I never believed in ghosts. Not really. Sure, I'd heard stories, just like anyone who's been around long enough in this business. Haunted arenas, cursed locker rooms, places where something bad happened and the energy just stayed. But those were just stories. At least, that's what I told myself. I had been working backstage for WWE for about 4 months. Nothing glamorous, just setting up the ring, moving equipment, and making sure everything was in place before the wrestlers showed up. The hours were long, the pay was decent, and the job was simple. At least, it was supposed to be. That night, we were in an old venue, the kind that smelled like sweat and stale beer, where the walls seemed to hold on to every fight, every cheer, every scream. The place had been around for decades, long before WWE came through. It had history, and something else, too. We finished up around 1:30 a.m., but I stayed behind to double-check the locker room. I didn't mind, quiet didn't bother me, but the silence in that room wasn't normal. It was thick, like the air wasn't just still, but watching me. I could hear the buzz of the overhead lights, the distant hum of a vending machine in the hallway. I tossed a few loose towels into a bin, grabbed my bag, and turned to leave. That's when I heard it. A whisper, so soft I almost missed it. A single breath of sound curling through the air, so close to my ear that I could feel the warmth of it. I stopped. My heart slammed against my ribs. The room was empty. I swallowed hard and shook it off. Maybe it was the air vents, or my own tired mind playing tricks. I took another step toward the door. Then, a locker door creaked open. Not a bang, not a slam. A slow, deliberate creak, the kind that makes your stomach turn because it means someone opened it. I turned my head, every muscle in my body locking up. The locker stood halfway open, a dark sliver of space gaping back at me. Something moved inside, not a reflection, not a shadow. Something. I should have run, should have bolted right then and there. But my legs didn't work. My brain didn't work. Every instinct screamed at me to get out. But something else, some awful, morbid curiosity, forced me to step closer. The air grew heavy, thick with a smell I couldn't place. Something old, something wrong. I reached out, my fingers trembling as they brushed against the cold metal of the locker door. And then, a voice, low, rough, like someone choking on gravel. "You don't belong here." I didn't hear it. I felt it. It was inside my bones, inside my skull, pressing down on me like a weight. My body finally obeyed. I ran. I didn't even think, just ran, crashing through the locker room door, down the dimly lit hallway, straight into a security guard. He grabbed my arms to steady me. "Jesus, kid, what the hell's wrong with you?" I couldn't speak. My lungs felt squeezed, like something was still holding on to me. But I managed to gasp out, "Locker room. Someone's in there." The guard's expression didn't change. He didn't look surprised, didn't even look confused. He just sighed. "You heard him, huh?" I stared at him, my chest rising and falling too fast. What the hell was that? He glanced over my shoulder toward the locker room, then back at me. "You should go home," he said quietly. "And if you're smart, don't stay late in that room again." I shook my head. "Tell me, what did I just hear?" The guard exhaled slowly. Then he said, "A long time ago, back when this place still ran local shows, a wrestler died in that locker room. Heart attack. No one found him for hours." A chill ran through me. "They say he never left," the guard continued. "A few guys claim to hear whispers in there over the years. Some say they've seen his reflection in the mirrors, standing behind them. But no one's ever stuck around long enough to find out if it's real." I wanted to tell myself he was messing with me. Just some old timer having fun at the expense of a new guy. But I had been in that room. I had heard it. And the worst part, when I ran past those lockers, I swear I felt fingers brush against my back. I never stayed late again. Story 2. I remember the night clearly, though I wish I didn't. The smell of sweat and canvas. The faint hum of the overhead lights. The way the air seemed just a little too still, like the whole building was holding its breath. Kyle and I were the last ones at the performance center that night. It wasn't unusual. When you're a rookie, you take whatever extra ring time you can get. No one tells you that being the last ones out also means you're the only ones left in the dark. Kyle had been messing with his wrist tape near the turnbuckle while I rolled into the ring, my muscles aching from a long day of training. That's when I noticed it. The air felt heavy, not just the weight of exhaustion. I mean physically heavy, like I had stepped into something thicker than air. It pressed against my skin the way humidity does before a storm, except it was dry as a bone inside that place. I shook it off, chalking it up to my body, protesting another round of bumps, and stretched my arms across the ropes. Then Kyle's voice cut through the silence. "Dude, someone's in there with you." I laughed, expecting him to be joking, but the look on his face wasn't playful. His eyes were locked onto the center of the ring, his fingers twitching at his sides. I followed his gaze. Nothing. Just the empty, pale blue mat. But the ropes were moving, not bouncing from my weight, not swaying from a draft. They sagged like someone was leaning against them. The bottom rope stretched downward, just a little, then released as if something had stepped off. I felt it before I heard it. A shift in the air, an unnatural pulse in the canvas beneath my feet. Then, boom, the whole ring shook. Not like a wobble, not like someone dropping into it from the apron. Shook like a 300-pounder had just hit a spine buster from the top rope. The turnbuckles rattled. The steel posts groaned. And the sound, it wasn't just the impact. There was a deep, guttural exhale, like the sound a man makes when he's been holding his breath too long. Kyle bolted first. I didn't wait to see what had made that noise. I flew through the ropes, nearly twisting my ankle on the landing, and sprinted for the locker room. I don't even remember grabbing my bag. Just the slam of the door behind us and the way we stood there, panting, waiting to hear footsteps behind us. But nothing came. The next morning, we hesitated to say anything, thinking we'd sound crazy. But when we told one of the veteran trainers, he didn't laugh. He just nodded, his face unreadable. "You're not the first," he said, almost too casually. "People have seen him before." Kyle and I exchanged glances. "Who?" I asked. The trainer didn't answer, just walked away, shaking his head like he'd already said too much. I wanted to ask more. I wanted to know what we had just run from. But part of me realized that some questions are better left unanswered. I never stayed late again. Story 3. I never liked wrestling in small towns. Something about those old venues, the way they smelled like stale beer, rusted metal, and memories long past their prime. It always made my skin crawl. Maybe it was the way the lights buzzed overhead, flickering just enough to make shadows seem like they moved. Maybe it was the way the old men in the audience sat with dead stares, their hands folded over their bellies, like they were watching ghosts of themselves in the ring. Or maybe it was because in places like these, the past never really died. I was still trying to make a name for myself back then, an enhancement talent, a guy they brought in to make the bigger names look good. I was just happy to be booked, happy for the chance to get in the ring. Even if it was in some forgotten town where the buildings leaned and like they had secrets to whisper. The venue that night was old, real old. The kind of place that had seen generations of wrestlers come and go. The locker room reeked of mildew and sweat, the floors scuffed by 1,000 boots before mine. Some of the local guys were talking about the place, swapping stories the way wrestlers do. "You know about Frank the Tank, right?" one of them asked. I shook my head. Used to wrestle here back in the 60s. Big dude, mean as hell. They say he disappeared after a match. Just gone. Like he walked out of the ring and never came back. I roll my eyes. Wrestlers love their ghost stories. Every old venue has a share of them. But that night, something happened. Something I still can't explain. I was in the middle of my match, taking bumps like usual, playing my role. The crowd wasn't big, maybe 100 people, if that. But they were loud. And then I saw him. He was standing by the barricade, watching me. An old man, bigger than he should have been, with broad shoulders and a body that looked carved from stone, but sagging in all the wrong places. His singlet was faded, stretched over his belly like it barely fit. And his face was hollow. His eyes weren't just empty. They were wrong, like there was nothing inside him. Just a husk, a shadow of something that once existed but didn't anymore. I tried to shake it off, kept working the match. But every time I looked back, he was still there. He never moved, never blinked, just stood there, staring at me like he knew me, like he'd been waiting. When the match ended, I barely heard the ref counting to 3. My opponent raised his hand, but I wasn't paying attention anymore. My eyes went straight to the barricade. The old man was gone. The spot where he had been was empty. After the show, I couldn't shake the feeling. I found one of the veteran wrestlers in the back, a guy who had been on the circuit for years. I told him what I saw. His face turned white. "You're messing with me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I swear," I told him. Big guy, old singlet, just stood there, staring. He swallowed hard, then pulled out his phone, scrolling through old photos. Finally, he stopped and turned the screen toward me. My stomach dropped. It was him, the same face, the same dead, hollow eyes. "That's Frank the Tank," the veteran said. "He wrestled here, but he's been dead for over 40 years. I didn't sleep that night, didn't even stay in that town. I packed my bag and got the hell out as soon as I could. I never wrestled there again. But sometimes, when I'm watching old wrestling footage, just random stuff, clips from classic matches, I'll catch a glimpse. A shadow in the crowd, a face in the background. He's never moving, never blinking, just watching. And I swear to God, he's getting closer